ask for all of you. I want you to look at your hands. So look at the palms, okay? Just notice the creases there, the lines, maybe there's some calluses. Now turn them over, look on this side. Look at your fingernails. Maybe there's dirt there. Maybe you got some sunspots, or maybe there's a scar or two. Now turn them back over again. Now you got to realize that these hands have been working with you and for you your whole life. When you were an infant, your hands were probably the first way that you engaged in the world, by touching things and eventually figuring out how to get stuff in your mouth. Probably your hands then were used when you first started to crawl, and then maybe when you're walking as a toddler, you had to use it to grab onto things. Maybe you fell over. But eventually your hands probably then were the vehicles for you to make things, like put Legos together, or Play-Doh. Eventually use your hands to learn how to write, maybe do some math. But your hands then probably were used to do things like, catch a ball, or play house, or paint, or draw. Sometimes you use your hands right away to use a phone, or use your thumbs for your cell. But maybe your hands were the first things that you used to encounter a loved one, to touch a loved one, reach out, join hands. Your hands then probably were used in your business or your affairs at work or at school. Maybe you developed a skill, like an art skill or an athletic skill, but you probably used your hands in some way. And now maybe you continue to use your hands to support yourself. Some of you older folks are grabbing onto canes or walkers or wheelchairs. Your hands have certainly been with you your whole time, your whole life. This last Tuesday was a memorial feast day for Saint Teresa of Avila, or Saint Teresa of Jesus, a friend of Jesus. And she has many, many great lines. She lived in the Middle Ages, like in the 1500s. But one of her lines was, "God has no other hands except yours." If you want to know how God is going to work in the world, well then just look down at your hands. This is what God's going to do. In the gospel, Jesus is telling a parable, and he's again trying to prove a point to say, you got to keep praying always. Don't ever give up in prayer. He says, pray unceasingly. And then he uses the example of the judge. You got to remember, this judge, dishonest, Jesus says. It's like he just wants to have things for himself and get money for himself. But this widow keeps nagging him and wants him to do a judgment. So Jesus says, you just heard it, if that judge is going to listen to this persistent asking, how much more will God do that for you? You continue to ask, God is going to respond. How does God respond? Well, according to St. Teresa, God has no other hands except your hands. This is how God is going to respond to your prayers. Give an example. A priest friend of mine, had back surgery recently. He was in terrible pain, had the surgery, things went well. And I asked him, a couple weeks later, I said, how's it going now? He said, not so good. The surgery was fine, but after the surgery, the doctors and the therapists, they want me to do some exercises and stretching. And I haven't done any. Like, hello? If you're going to get healed, you got to do your part. There's nothing just magic about a surgery. You got to do what you got to do to get healthy. Or it's like the story of the man who heard that there's going to be bad rains and maybe a possible flood. So he says, dear God, help me, protect me through this flood. And sure enough, he's in his house, and the waters came, and the rain was coming, and the water started going higher and higher, so much so that it was flooding all over. So a boat comes by and says, okay, come on, get into the boat. And the man says, no, 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 no. God will save me. I'm just fine. Well, then the rain kept coming, and the water got higher and higher, so that it was flooding all the area, getting higher, and another boat comes by, and they yell out, come on, get into the boat. He says, no, I put my trust in God. God will help me. God, please save me. The rains kept coming. The water got higher and higher. The man had to stand on top of his house, on the roof. All of a sudden, a helicopter comes by and puts down a big ladder. Grab the ladder! No! I'm going to put my trust in God. God will save me. I pray to God. Well, the rains kept coming, and the water got so high it went over the roof. And the man drowned. He goes up to heaven. He goes to the pearly gates, meets God. And he says, what's with this, God? I prayed to you to save me. And God says, didn't you get the 2 boats and the helicopter I sent you? I mean, we got to do our part. In another part of the Bible, Jesus says to people, would you stop worrying so much? Would you stop stressing about things? Jesus says, think of the birds. They don't worry, they don't stress, and yet they're taken care of. They got enough to eat. And I love that example. But if you think of it, birds just don't sit on a branch and then a worm pops in their mouth. The bird gets down on the ground and looks and does its part, and then God takes care of it. It's the same with any of us. When we pray to God, we also got to do our part. Which means if you want to be healthy, you got to start doing your exercises, doing your stretches, eat your good food, get your good sleep. If you've got an issue with somebody, well, you go and perhaps reach out your hand and apologize and try to amend things. Maybe you've got to go and write that letter or that email. If you want to have change in the world, it's going to happen because of your hands, not somebody else's. There was a woman. She was not in a good place. So she comes to church in the middle of the day to pray. And she said, dear God, help me. Life is not going well for me. And I don't even know if you exist, God. If you are there, please send a sign so that I know you are here. And then all of a sudden, she feels a hand on the side of her arm. She looks, and there's another woman sitting there. The woman says to her, well, what do you think? God's going to send a hand all the way down from heaven? God just used whatever hand was close by. And maybe God is wanting to use your hands to go make a difference. Not only to open your hands to say, okay, God, I want this to happen, and to do your thing. Not just to pray and just hope and wait around, but do what you got to do. But maybe God is asking you to go change the world. Maybe you got to go out and get that rake to help somebody. Maybe you got to go out and offer a hand of apology. Maybe you got to go out there and bring the cookies over to the neighbor. St. Teresa said, God has no other hands but yours. And sometimes when we pray like with closed fists. Okay, God, this is what I want to happen. You better get to doing this. And think of the first reading. When Moses simply opened his hands up, God was able to do good things. And wonderful things happened. Because Moses opened his hands up and said, okay, God, let your goodness come through us, through me. St. Teresa wrote a whole big poem. And I want to share the whole thing with you. It's really good. It goes like this. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things pass. God does not change. Patience achieves everything. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. Christ has no body on earth but yours. No hands but yours. No feet but yours. Yours are the eyes through which the compassion of Christ must look out on the world. Yours are the feet with which God is to go about doing good. Yours are the hands with which God is to bless